Anger rarely announces itself as destruction. It introduces itself as justification. It tells you that you are right, that you are defending truth, that you are protecting dignity, that you are responding appropriately to wrongdoing. And in many cases, something genuinely unfair has happened. Someone spoke carelessly. Someone betrayed trust. Someone dismissed your effort. Anger feels natural in those moments. It rises quickly, almost automatically, like a reflex. And because it feels powerful, it can easily convince you that it is also wise. But the book of Proverbs draws a sharp line between feeling anger and being ruled by it. Proverbs 14:29 says, "Whoever is slow to anger has great understanding, but he who has a hasty temper exalts folly." Notice the contrast. Slowness is linked with understanding. Hastiness is linked with folly. In other words, anger itself is not automatically condemned, but speed is questioned. When your reaction outruns your reflection, wisdom is already compromised. Most relational damage does not begin with long-term hatred. It begins with quick words spoken in heated moments. A sarcastic comment, a raised voice, a sharp tone, a dismissive look. These seem small at first, but words have memory, they linger. They replay in the mind long after the moment has passed. And Proverbs repeatedly emphasizes the power of speech, because relationships are built or broken by what leaves your mouth. When anger controls your speech, it narrows your perception. You begin interpreting everything through offense. Neutral statements feel like attacks. Delays feel like disrespect. Disagreement feels like rejection. The emotional intensity of anger convinces you that your interpretation is accurate. But intensity does not equal clarity. In fact, strong emotion often reduces nuance. You stop listening. You prepare rebuttals instead of understanding. You assume motive instead of asking questions. Proverbs 15:1 gives one of the most countercultural instructions in all of Scripture. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. This is profoundly practical. It suggests that anger is contagious, but so is restraint. When harshness meets harshness, escalation is almost guaranteed. But when harshness meets calmness, the momentum shifts. The tone lowers, the temperature drops, the cycle weakens. Yet this feels unnatural. When someone speaks sharply to you, your instinct is to match their energy, to assert yourself, to defend your position with equal force. A soft answer can feel like weakness. It can feel like surrender. But Proverbs reframes it as strength rooted in understanding. The person who can restrain their tone in the middle of provocation is not powerless. They are disciplined. They are governed internally rather than driven externally. Anger often disguises deeper emotions: hurt, fear, insecurity, disappointment. When someone criticizes you, anger may rise first, but beneath it may be fear of inadequacy. When someone ignores you, anger may surface, but beneath it may be a fear of insignificance. If you only react to the surface emotion, you miss the underlying wound. And unresolved wounds, when expressed through repeated anger, erode intimacy over time. Proverbs 19:11 states, "Good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook an offense." This verse challenges modern instincts. It suggests that not every offense requires confrontation. Not every irritation deserves expression. There is glory in overlooking certain offenses. That does not mean suppressing serious injustice. It means recognizing that some slights are minor and magnifying them only inflates ego. Wisdom discerns which battles are necessary and which are fueled by pride. Much relational tension persists because both parties feel entitled to react. You believe your frustration justifies your tone. The other person believes their tone justifies your response. And so the cycle continues. Each side feels wronged. Each side feels validated in escalation. Proverbs interrupts this pattern by shifting focus from what the other person deserves to how you choose to respond. You cannot control another person's temper, but you can govern your own. There is also a difference between righteous anger and ego-driven anger. Righteous anger is directed toward genuine injustice and seeks restoration. Ego-driven anger is directed toward personal offense and seeks dominance or validation. The first is rare and measured. The second is common and impulsive. One builds courage without cruelty. The other builds walls. And if you are honest, most daily anger in relationships does not arise from grand injustice. It arises from inconvenience, miscommunication, and unmet expectations. Unmet expectations are particularly powerful triggers. You assumed someone would respond a certain way. They did not. You expected appreciation. It did not come. You anticipated understanding. Instead, you received criticism. The gap between expectation and reality creates frustration. If that gap is not processed wisely, it spills into sharp words. And once spoken, words cannot be retrieved. Anger also creates a distorted sense of urgency. It convinces you that everything must be addressed immediately. That silence equals weakness. That if you do not respond right now, you will lose authority. But wisdom often waits. It allows emotion to settle before articulation. It separates impulse from intention. The ability to delay response is one of the clearest indicators of maturity. When you can pause, breathe, and reconsider, you shift from reaction to leadership within your own spirit. Proverbs 16:32 offers a striking comparison. Whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city. In ancient times, conquering a city was the ultimate symbol of strength. Yet this proverb claims that self-control surpasses military victory. Why? Because conquering external territory is easier than governing internal impulses. It is possible to appear powerful outwardly while being unstable inwardly. True strength is measured by what you restrain, not what you overpower. Think about the relationships in your life that matter most. Family, close friends, a spouse, colleagues. Over time, it is not grand betrayals that usually fracture these bonds. It is accumulated harshness, repeated dismissiveness, ongoing impatience, words spoken carelessly again and again. Anger does not have to explode to damage intimacy. It can simmer quietly, expressed through tone and posture, gradually creating distance. The tragedy is that many people justify their anger because they believe it communicates strength. They believe that forceful speech commands respect. But fear-based compliance is not respect, it is avoidance. People may grow quieter around you, but not closer. They may concede outwardly, but withdraw inwardly. Anger might win arguments, but it rarely wins hearts. And this is why Proverbs is so relentlessly practical. It does not simply say, "Do not be angry." It redirects attention towards slowness, softness, self-rule, and discernment. It acknowledges the emotional surge but refuses to let that surge dictate action. It recognizes that relationships are fragile ecosystems shaped daily by tone, timing, and restraint. If you want relationships that endure, anger must be mastered rather than indulged, because every harsh word plants something. And what you plant consistently will eventually grow. Anger does not only damage relationships in explosive moments. It reshapes the atmosphere of a relationship over time. Even when it is not loud, even when it is not dramatic, it changes how safe people feel around you. Proverbs 22:24-25 warns, "Make no friendship with a man given to anger, nor go with a wrathful man, lest you learn his ways and entangle yourself in a snare." That warning is revealing. Anger is described not merely as a reaction, but as a pattern away. And patterns are contagious. Spend enough time around someone ruled by temper, and you begin adjusting yourself around their volatility. You measure your words more carefully, not out of respect, but out of caution. You avoid certain topics. You withhold honesty. You grow hyper-aware of tone shifts. Over time, emotional safety erodes. And when safety erodes, authenticity follows. The relationship may continue outwardly, but something vital underneath begins to thin. This is what unchecked anger does. It teaches people to walk on eggshells. It creates unpredictability. And unpredictability breeds distance. You may not notice it immediately. You may assume people are simply quiet or compliant. But often they are guarded. Proverbs calls this a snare because it traps not only the angry person, but everyone connected to them. The angry individual becomes isolated without realizing it, while those around them adapt defensively. There is also a personal cost to sustained anger that goes beyond relationships. Proverbs 27:4 states, "Wrath is cruel, anger is overwhelming." Overwhelming is an important word. Anger floods perception. It narrows your cognitive field. When you are angry, your mind seeks confirmation. It looks for additional evidence that you have been wronged. It filters neutral behavior as intentional harm. In this state, you are not evaluating clearly. You are reinforcing emotion. Anger can also create moral self-deception. Because you feel wronged, you justify harshness. Because you feel disrespected, you justify disrespect. Because you feel unheard, you justify interrupting. Emotion becomes evidence. But Proverbs repeatedly insists that wisdom is not defined by how strongly you feel, but by how rightly you act. Strength of emotion does not equal moral accuracy. Another subtle danger of anger is how it interacts with memory. When you are repeatedly angry at someone, you begin collecting grievances. Past offenses are stored and recalled easily. Old arguments are rehearsed internally. Small irritations are added to a growing mental ledger. This accumulation makes forgiveness increasingly difficult, because you are not responding to one moment, you are reacting to a history. Proverbs emphasizes overlooking offenses precisely because accumulation magnifies resentment. Proverbs 17:9 says, "Whoever covers an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates close friends." Repeating a matter does not only mean gossiping to others. It can mean replaying it mentally again and again. Each repetition deepens the groove of resentment. Each retelling strengthens the emotional charge. Eventually, the offense becomes larger in memory than it was in reality, and the relationship bends under the weight of accumulated narrative. There is also a difference between confrontation and combustion. Wisdom does not avoid necessary conversations. It does not suppress legitimate concerns, but it approaches them with steadiness rather than volatility. Confrontation rooted in wisdom seeks clarity and restoration. Combustion rooted in anger seeks release and dominance. One strengthens trust over time. The other erodes it. Often, anger erupts when expectations remain unspoken. You assume someone understands your needs. They do not. You assume your effort is visible. It is not acknowledged. Instead of calmly expressing your disappointment, you allow frustration to build silently. And when it finally surfaces, it explodes disproportionately. The other person feels blindsided because they were unaware of the internal narrative you were constructing. Proverbs encourage clarity because clarity prevents emotional accumulation. There is also pride woven into much relational anger. Pride insists on being right. Pride resists apology. Pride interprets compromise as weakness. But Proverbs consistently links humility with wisdom. When you can admit, "I overreacted," you protect the relationship more than if you defend your reaction endlessly. Apology is not humiliation, it is repair. And repair strengthens bonds. Anger also distorts time perception. In the heat of conflict, the present moment feels absolute. It feels decisive. It feels as though what is said now will define everything. That intensity can push you to speak words you later regret. But wisdom widens time perspective. It asks, will this matter in a year? Will this comment strengthen or weaken the long-term health of this relationship? Slowing anger is often about stretching perspective beyond the immediate surge. Consider how many relational fractures began not with betrayal, but with tone. A sarcastic remark repeated over months. A pattern of impatience. A dismissive response during stress. These small expressions accumulate into identity labels. You're always harsh. You never listen. Once those labels form, every interaction is filtered through them. And reversing that perception requires consistent gentleness over time. Proverbs does not underestimate the power of words, because words shape reality. A household where anger dominates becomes tense even in silence. A workplace where temper rules becomes cautious rather than creative. A friendship where irritation is constant becomes shallow rather than vulnerable. The emotional climate of a relationship is built daily by controlled or uncontrolled reactions. And here is the deeper truth. Anger often promises relief but delivers regret. In the moment of expression, it feels cathartic. It feels like release. But afterward, you replay your tone. You reconsider your phrasing. You sense distance. You recognize that something intangible has shifted. That aftertaste of regret is evidence that anger, when unrestrained, rarely produces the outcome it promised. Proverbs calls you to rule your spirit because an unruled spirit eventually rules your relationships. If you do not govern your reactions, they will govern your reputation. If you do not manage your temper, it will manage how others approach you. And if you repeatedly choose intensity over restraint, you will slowly construct walls you never intended to build. But the presence of anger does not mean you are incapable of change. It means you are human. The question is not whether you feel anger. The question is whether you allow it to train you into a pattern or whether you train yourself into discipline. Wisdom is not automatic. It is practiced. And the practice begins with awareness. So how do you master anger before it masters your relationships? Because recognizing the danger is not enough. Awareness without discipline changes nothing. Proverbs calls you not only to understand anger, but to rule your spirit. And ruling your spirit is a daily practice, not a one-time decision. First, you must learn to slow the moment. Anger accelerates everything. Your heart rate rises, your voice tightens, your thoughts narrow, and speed becomes the enemy of wisdom. When you feel that surge, do not speak immediately. Even a pause of 5 seconds can shift the outcome of a conversation. Silence in those first seconds is not weakness. It is strength gathering itself. It is you choosing restraint over reaction. The difference between a relationship that survives and one that fractures is often measured in seconds. Second, separate interpretation from fact. When someone says something sharp, your mind immediately assigns motive. They meant to disrespect me. They are dismissing me. They do not value me. But those are interpretations, not facts. Proverbs emphasizes understanding because wisdom asks questions before drawing conclusions. Instead of reacting to what you think they meant, ask calmly for clarification. Many arguments escalate because assumptions harden into accusations. Third, decide in advance who you want to be when provoked. If you wait until the heat of conflict to determine your character, emotion will decide for you. But if you pre-commit to being slow to anger, soft in tone, and measured in response, you create internal boundaries. When provocation arrives, you are not improvising your values, you are living them. Discipline becomes easier when identity is settled beforehand. Fourth, address issues early and gently rather than late and explosively. Anger often builds because small frustrations are ignored. You tell yourself it is not worth mentioning. But silence accumulates pressure. Instead of storing irritation, express concerns calmly when they are small. A quiet, honest conversation early prevents a heated confrontation later. Proverbs praises the one who overlooks minor offenses, but it also values clarity. Wisdom discerns which issues require silence and which require gentle expression. Fifth, practice repair quickly. Even disciplined people will fail. You will speak too sharply at times. You will misjudge tone. When that happens, apologize without qualification. Do not attach justification. Do not say, "I'm sorry, but you made me." Own your words. Repair is powerful because it rebuilds safety. It communicates that the relationship matters more than your pride. And repeated repair strengthens trust over time. Sixth, examine the deeper roots of your anger. If certain reactions are recurring, they are pointing to something beneath the surface. Perhaps it is insecurity. Perhaps it is fear of losing control. Perhaps it is exhaustion. Anger is often a symptom, not the source. If you only manage the symptom without addressing the root, it will resurface in different situations. Proverbs encourage self-examination because wisdom grows when you understand yourself honestly. There's also a spiritual dimension that cannot be ignored. When you acknowledge God in your reactions, you remember that every conversation is occurring before Him. That awareness alone changes tone. It humbles you. It reminds you that righteousness is not proven through volume. It is demonstrated through restraint. When your identity is anchored in something stable, you feel less need to defend yourself aggressively in every minor conflict. Over time, controlled anger transforms relationships. A spouse feels safe to be honest. A friend feels comfortable sharing vulnerability. A colleague feels respected even in disagreement. When people know you are slow to anger, they trust you more deeply. They do not fear your reactions. They approach you with openness rather than caution. And that emotional safety becomes the foundation for stronger bonds. Imagine the difference between two households. In one, tension is constant. Voices rise quickly. Silence feels heavy. Everyone measures their words carefully. In the other, disagreement still happens, but tone remains steady. Correction is given without humiliation. Apologies are offered freely. The second environment does not lack conflict. It lacks volatility. And that difference shapes generations. Proverbs does not promise perfection. It offers direction. It invites you to become the kind of person whose presence lowers emotional temperature rather than raising it. Whose words calm rather than ignite. Whose strength is seen not in dominance but in discipline. If you struggle with anger, do not hide from it. Confront it honestly. Ask where it is rooted. Ask what it is protecting. And then begin practicing slowness, softness, and self-rule daily, because every restrained word plants peace. Every gentle answer weakens escalation. Every apology repairs fracture. As we continue this Proverbs series, we are not chasing abstract ideas. We are shaping character. We are learning how ancient wisdom speaks directly into modern tension, anxiety, pride, anger, discipline, relationships. Each principle is practical. Each verse is actionable. And each choice you make either builds or breaks something in the people closest to you. If this message challenged you, stay with the series. Subscribe and continue walking through Proverbs with me. Because relationships are too valuable to sacrifice to uncontrolled emotion. And strength is not proven by how loudly you speak, but by how well you govern your spirit.